Hello, all you skibbies. This is Graydancer, and I'm coming to you live from Madison, Wisconsin, the rope bondage capital of the world, with another episode of the Kink Sex Culture podcast. Yes, it is vastly late. There's been a lot of shit going on, in case you haven't been on FetLife, and if you haven't been on FetLife, you should not go on FetLife now, because it's kind of like telling somebody who's been in a coma since 2015 that they shouldn't ask who the president is. A lot of tragic stuff going on and a lot of politics and loud things, none of which we're going to deal with in this podcast. In this podcast, we're going to talk about happy things like the upcoming Grews. This weekend, Naya and I will be going to Cleveland, Ohio for the Cleveland Grew at the Academy, and we're very excited to see many people there, including the ferret. He's even coming, which is going to be awesome. And 2 weeks after that, we will be in Austin at the Austin Grew. You can find out and buy tickets to that at austin.grew.space. And then the week after that, we'll be in Kansas City for the Kansas City Grew. That's right. We had lots of fun stuff coming. And then in December, we're going to be in Baltimore, is it? Or is it the D.C. area?
Let's go with the Baltimore, D.C. area.
Baltimore, D.C. area. Hey, you know, it's all the same for us people in flyover country. We're just excited to get to visit you highfalutin people in the coasts. We are going to be at Naughty Noel, which will be a lot of fun. So, all those things are happening partially because of the support of sponsors like people on my Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Graydancer, you can go and you can help get me some tea, because I need tea to help me get over this flu that I'm having. Every little bit helps, and I try and give some special content. Like, for example, my patrons got to see my sketch notes from the 2 classes that I took from Barkus at FapCon. And their donations help get them little things like that, but more importantly, they help support me being able to do things like this podcast, which you get to hear for free. And 2 other people help me do that, and one of them is Twisted Monk. And one of the things I've been very impressed with Twisted Monk, you can always go to twistedmonk.com and find his various colors of the day and things like that. You can go ahead and keep working. I wasn't planning on you stopping. Because that's called ambiance from our high quality studio here. As I was saying, Twisted Monk is a big supporter of the podcast and has been ever since it began, and I've really appreciated his help. I'm also kind of follow his lead. He likes to give a portion of his profits to different organizations and charities that he wants to support. He has given to various charities during the flood relief times, and he's given to the ACLU. And I try and follow that lead by giving a portion of all the group profits to worthwhile causes, such as we gave to the Leather Foundation after the San Diego Grew. So I really appreciate him also supporting this podcast, and you should support him too by going to twistedmonk.com. Another very good friend of mine that literally, as I was working on this, she private messaged me and said, "Hey, are you putting out content?" Because she helps keep me on track, is Lee Allure. Now, Lee is a hypnotist and a teacher and kink teacher, and a kink. One of her kinks that she does is tickling. They organizes tickling conventions and things like that as well. And she is a soap maker extraordinaire. I'm still trying to get her to come up with a Grew soap, or possibly a rope craft soap. You know, soap on a rope. Who would ever... Wait, oh, that's been done. Never mind. Anyway, so Lee has also supported this podcast, and you can find out more about her things that she creates at leeallure.com. Now, for the content of the podcast, this is part 1 of a class that Dr. Eaves and I taught at the recent FapCon in Calgary, Alberta. Full disclosure, Dr. Eaves is my lover. Well, you'll hear all about that when we do the class. And this is part 1 of the class. I think it has a lot of good stuff included in it. Also, there are parts where I have cut out the voices of the people in the class, simply because I didn't have their permission to broadcast their voices. General laughter is included. and there's a bit of that. But I really want to appreciate the contribution of Dr. Eaves, not only to the podcast, but also to creating the class, and hey, to the general happiness of my polycule, because we all really find her absolutely amazing. And so here you go, part 1 of DS and Poly. Who are you?
Me?
Yeah, you. Introduce yourself. What are you doing here?
Hi, everybody. I'm Milena, or Dr. Eaves on FET. I am really fine with either one. I am an educator in my vanilla life, and I have been for the last 15 years or a little bit longer. In kink, I've been co-teaching and teaching for the last 5 or 6, I would say. I've been poly for 7 or 8 maybe, and in DS relationships of one kind or another for about half that time. And Gray and I are lovers, and then we'll talk a little bit about our other partners. And I'm here because I thought it would be a great opportunity. I was invited to have this conversation with Gray, with you folks who are willing to participate with us today. I'm excited about this, and super excited to. It's been really interesting for us to sort of explore over the last couple of months what we have taken for granted in some ways, because we've never co-taught this particular class together. And I'm excited to share that with you, but I'm also really interested in hearing what you have to say, and the questions you ask and the experience that you have, and I think we'll have time for that too. So, so yeah.
So, and I am Graydancer. Gray Miller is my real name. I'm lucky enough that I can be out in my work because my work is this. I've been teaching, I've been kinky all my life. Before I knew what sex was, I was having fantasies that I realize now were kinky, which is unfortunate. Started getting involved in the community around 2002, 2003, 2004. I started teaching. I've been a teacher and performer and public speaker by trade for a long time. Now I'm branching into event production. I do events called Brews. I do an event called Ropecraft that somebody won 2 tickets to at the silent auction. And a new event called Flow Erotic that is coming in April of next year. And I have also been, I've had polyamorous inclinations for most of my life because I was imprinted at an early age by Robert Heinlein. Yeah, here's the thing. It's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, talking about unrealistic. Sometimes you forget that science fiction is fiction. So I've been poly for a long time. I've been kinky for a long time. And I've been involved in a DS style of relationship for a very long time. That's pretty much always been part of my kink, is some kind of power exchange. Currently, my DS status is I am the dominus to Naya, who is my serva. Those are the titles that we use. And it's a 24-hour total power exchange type relationship. She is currently teaching at Kinky College in Chicago, where with her DS relationship is that she has a book called Ozma of Oz. And we'll talk a little bit more about that whole thing, but the technical part is that she is the librarian who takes care of the book and does things with it and leaves bookmarks, for among other things. And I have a part in that I am the editor, in that I also occasionally leave red marks and rearrange the contents. So that's the DS solution there. We're going to talk more about the polycule too, which we wanted to acknowledge.
Yes.
Do you want to do your side of things first?
Yeah, there's lots of voices who consented. There's a group of voices that have consented to us speaking about them and sharing about our dynamics. And on my side, I've been married. Will be next year. Will be 20 years with my husband, my partner. We have a child, and I have a partner here as well. We've been partners for almost 2 years. And for my DS side, I would consider myself, because you and I mean, we do DS, but we are not in a DS relationship. And I would consider myself in recovery currently for DS. So it's been a part of my dynamics in the past, but not currently.
And on my side, I told you about my servant, Naya, and our book. Our book also has a husband, L. Frank Baum, the author. And I also have the title we use is Amatrix, which means lover in Latin, who is by the name of Hannah, who has 2 kids, not with me, but before. And I think that's the extent of my side of the polycule, pretty much. Yeah. So, and they also, I gave a class similar to this at Synergy in Michigan with Naya and Hannah, talking about poly and DS and the way these things work together. However, we thought it was important that we tailor this class to our experience between us and our experiences with the DS side of things and the poly side of things. So while there are some things that do apply with them, this is our speaking to our experience together. And we have been involved for how long?
Depends how you're counting. So it's
from the first moment I heard your voice.
We'll be the first FabCon. So that's where we met.
We first met at the first FabCon, yeah. And yeah. So let's talk about it. The answer to we have a whole pages of notes, but I told her we could actually just pick it down to poly and DS. Just do what the dominant says, and everybody will get along. Because they're all interchangeable anyway, right? That's the way it works. You know. That is the Robert Heinlein version of things, actually.
It works great.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of different things. One of the first issues that I ran into with polyamory when I first got involved in it was because the only real how-to book was The Ethical Slut, which is a great book, but it's specifically targeted towards a certain demographic and written by a certain demographic from a certain point of view, and if you don't fit in that, it can be difficult. So saying you're poly is not always as easy as just saying, it's like saying you're Christian. Well, okay, that's great. It doesn't mean you're going to get along because one may be Russian Orthodox and one may be Unitarian Universalist, and they don't always, doesn't mean the same thing. So things like hierarchical poly, primaries, secondaries, things like that. Non-hierarchical poly, relationship anarchy, solo poly, satellites and comets and ideas like that go in. There's a lot of different kinds of things. I really recommend the book Opening Up by Tristan Taormino for a great overview of the many different styles there are. I discovered in that book that the reason my first poly and DS relationship imploded was because we had how do we do it? I was non-hierarchical poly. My wife was closed poly, and my slave at the time was, what was the other term for it? Where it's a small circle of people.
Yeah.
Anyway, she wanted, my wife wanted us 2 and everybody else was secondary. My slave wanted us 3 and everybody else was secondary and I was like, hey, you're interesting. Let's see what happens. And the thing was that when you don't realize that that's the problem, you think that somebody's doing it wrong, when the reality was that we had different needs, and recognizing that is a very important part of making things work.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the trickiest parts is that you don't necessarily know until you're in it, right? I mean, goodwill is a great thing. My therapist is trying to teach me currently that goodwill goes a long way to making our society function. But the problem with it is, when you meet somebody and you say, yeah, I can make, I honestly want this to work with you, but you have fundamentally different ideas around what does togetherness mean? What does family mean? What does because this trickles down all the way to what does honesty mean? What does it mean for me to have some things to be sacred? sacred versus some things to be open. It ends up being sort of trickled down into so many day-to-day ongoing things that it ends up being, independent of the goodwill, it's just a lot of work that is exhausting and undoable for folks.
And it has to be bespoke. It has. My daughter is poly, and I had to talk with my son-in-law because he was having questions about how poly worked, and I felt so sorry for him because he wanted me to tell him, this is what you do and this is how you make it work. And I had to say, no, you have to figure it out, and it's tough.
So DS ties. So we got leather, rockstar, handler, daddy, mommy, girl, boy, pony, genderqueer, master, slave, literary, right? So there's lots and lots of different dynamics there too.
Who has one we didn't name there? Who has a style of DS that we didn't name in that list? Owner property.
Nice.
So I'm actually writing up here, and like we said, opening up by Tristan Taormino, there's also a URL of a online resource that has a lot of interesting things about DS in it, and yes, I confess it's a little self-serving because I am part of that, but also educators like Lee Harrington, Melina Williams,
Books by Dr. Robert
Rubell has written a lot of good books about it. But there's a lot of free videos, including one that I'm very proud of called Masculine Dominant Archetypes, which includes things like the rock star and the handler. People who are familiar with Shea and Stefanos from previous years, that's their dynamic, rock star and handler. And it works very well for them. The URL is kinkacademy.graydancer.com. You can feel free to come up afterwards and look at it.
One of the things that was really interesting when we started to sort of negotiate the possibility of doing something, being together in some way, was that we overlap on a lot of these things, right? So, we both have kinky parts of our lives, and we both have poly parts of our lives, and then vanilla parts of our lives to some extent. And trying to figure out which of those would overlap and which we would set aside was, to me, that was a new level of complexity. If I would say chances are that if I was with someone like Gray who isn't Gray, I would probably look for a more DS kind of relationship, right? If I sort of looked at the descriptor of him on paper, then I would say we are in a DS, right? We are poly, we're in DS. We probably have some hierarchy, like that would be what my dynamic would look like.
Yeah, the hierarchy is a big part of it in terms of, since I am used to being around in a DS relationship, we had to negotiate. Is it going to be a, the way I define it is the dominant is the one who comes up with a plan, and the submissive is the one who tries to follow the dominant as the dominant tries to follow the plan. We had to decide if it was going to be like that or if it's going to be more of a mutual thing where we're equals, and then occasionally say, hey, let's play around with the idea that I'm going to take you down to the dungeon and do horrible things to you.
And that's where we landed.
Yeah.
But it was not a given, because I think each one of us came with our own kind of set of, not expectations, but prior practices that had to be redefined and reestablished. So the territory had to be set up for our particular situation.
And there's a school of thought in dominance that if you are not, that by not having a relationship with you, I am less of a dominant. I subscribe to the school of dominance that says that I am so dominant that it does not require the presence of another person for me to be dominant. So regardless of that, and I choose where and when I can exercise that. And I find it both a way to cherish the experience of being, the thrill of being with someone in a co-equal space, and also then appreciate more when I'm with someone who is in that way. It lets me appreciate the difference between the two. So it's not a question of, well, I have to be this way with you, because if I'm not, then you will think less of me, or I'm less of a dominant, or worse, Naya will think less of me because I'm not, Which kind of brings us up to the next thing, is jealousy.
Oh, yes.
Jealousy is a big, I should say, all of this is not, we're not going to give you any solutions. What we're going to do is we're going to bring up the things that we've talked about, some of the ways that we have dealt with them, not necessarily solved them, but dealt with them. with the idea that these might be things you want to consider as well. What are some things that people get jealous of?
At this point, people began calling out things, and since I don't have their permission to use their voices, I'm going to just read you some of the things that they said. Things like time, attention, presence, that's presence as in being there, intimacy, connection, security, presents as in things that you give each other, rituals, titles, status, similarities, differences, appearance. And that's the point when I said, if we're going to talk about appearance, I want to talk about abilities.
True story. My slave, when I had a slave, I introduced her to this wonderful man who I knew she'd get along with really well because he was big and manly and bristly and stuff like that. And of course, when they finally had sex, she came back, she says, "Oh my God, it's so amazing. His cock hits my G-spot every single time." And I was like, "Great. So glad you had fun." Compersion. No. Compersion is taking joy in the joy of your partner.
How do you feel about compersion, right?
It's wonderful when it happens. It is something that can be cultivated, and it is something that can take you by surprise, and it is wonderful. It is not automatic, and if you don't feel it, does not mean you're bad at being poly. That's how I feel. How do you feel?
One of the things that for us, for me, is interesting and tricky is that we see each other about twice a year. So, from what I can tell, though I don't try to keep track because that would not be good for me, I'm pretty sure that Gray sees his other partners way more than that. So, right at the very beginning, one of the permissions that I had to, one of the part of my process was to understand and accept, and I had to trust that I really could accept the fact that there just was never going to be equality. Like that was just not on the table, right? That was not a way that I could evaluate the quality of our relationship, was how much I got was equal to what they got, because that just was never going to happen. And I think that in some ways that became easier because it is literally physically impossible to do that. Part of it was also because you and I talked about it. You know, when we were, and we did in some ways, I think I'm sort of reflecting on it, we did very actively negotiate what this space looked like. We talked about it a lot before it happened. And I think that helped too, because one of the early conversations we had, and you were great about that, you said, look, if you expect me to text you every single day, I'm not your guy. Like, I'm just not, that's not going to happen. Right? So then again, I had one of those moments where I had to sort of sit back and go, okay, is that something that I need? Is that something that I want from him? Is that something that I can live without? Now that becomes challenging, okay, so jealousy. Jealousy is not just jealousy because life isn't. So when I had a really difficult time in my life, all of a sudden, all the principles that I had sort of pre-established and the things that I went like, yeah, you know what? I can do this and I don't need that much, and really I understand that we are so far away from each other, etc. All of a sudden these things became that much more tangible because I was in grief and I was suffering. And I really I needed support. I needed that extra attention. You know, all of a sudden my support was gone. So the flip side of that too was that we had enough, that's why we've lasted a little while, is that I could go back in and renegotiate that space and say, okay, I know we talked about this, but here's my experience, what can you offer?
And we'll be talking later on about how the polycule can actually help with that kind of need thing as well. Another issue of jealousy that has popped up, and this wasn't necessarily directly with Milena, but it happened recently with Naya and our book. The three of us went to an event, and the first time I ever got my boots blacked, Naya was the boot black bench. Somebody blacked my boots, and it was great, it was awesome, it was wonderful. So Naya wanted to black my boots at this new, she's taken up boot blacking and things like that, and I said, oh, that'd be great. Hey, maybe Ozma could be my boot black stand. I thought that would be, because we really enjoyed that the first time, it'd be fine. And Naya had this funny look on her face. She said, I'm kind of feeling like I'm being displaced. logical, and I'm going to say it, male brain of me was like, how could you possibly be displaced? You are right there. You are present in this scene. I mean, you're obviously there. And it took a while for me to wrap my head around the fact that for her, there's this memory of my boots being blacked and she as the boot black bench. It's the only time that's happened with us. Now there was going to be this new memory of me having my boots blacked, and instead of her as the boot black bench, it was going to be Ozma. She was being displaced. And the fact that she was doing the blacking of the boots didn't change that feeling. But again, and this for jealousy or envy, we'll talk about the difference, I promise. The jealousy and envy are emotions. Anger is an emotion. We talk about anger management. Jealousy is an emotion. There's jealousy management. It's not bad if you're jealous. It's the actions you take and the ways that you learn to deal with it that matter. Differences between jealousy and envy. Jealousy, I want to have that chair, and I don't want you to have that chair. That's jealousy. Envy is, wow, I wish I had a chair like that. I mean, it's great that you have that, but I wish I had one too. That'd be cool. Okay, so that's the difference between those two.
And that's actually helped me a lot. And this was a few years ago that somebody spoke that to me, and it was a little like a penny dropped. And ever since that moment, I've actually tried to reframe my experience, at least question it, to say, okay, am I actually really jealous? Do I really not want this person to have this? Do I really not want Hannah to have a date with you? Like, do I really not? Or is it that I kind of wish that you and I could have a date sometimes?
Right.
And I mean, for me, 9 times out of 10, that's the case. And actually, because I have great affection for your other partners, luckily, I'm able to do that because we've built that, right? That's more times than not where, I can just say, no, actually, I just really miss him. That's really the feeling. The feeling is, I wish that we could walk through a garden together, not that it has anything to do with her.
Right. It varies, I mean, this morning we were laying in bed looking at the marks that Naya left on Ozma, which was great to share. But I have been in situations where, where the partner, basically when I was with that partner, no other partners were allowed to be mentioned or existed or anything like that. Like they wanted a complete and utter shutdown because that was their boundary. It's a legitimate boundary. What I found was that that boundary did not work for me. I can't pretend that everybody else doesn't exist. So it took me a while to realize that it was okay for me to have a boundary too, which is that I need to be acknowledged that there are other people around. So, but it's entirely, you have to work that out between the two or more of you kind of thing. And it's important to recognize there is a difference between privacy and secrecy. Secrecy is, I'm trying to keep this from you. And privacy is, this space is mine, and the other person respects it. So people need to have private and sacred spaces, sometimes as a couple and sometimes as other things. Because a lot of people, poly and DS, I mean, one of the things that we're not going to talk about is people who have multiple slaves, multiple masters, multiple things like that. But that's certainly a reality. And that's a tricky situation to deal with. So it's a question of, you have to, the one thing that I think works well for that is the recognizing that what makes things special is not the title, it's not the trappings, it's not the rituals, it is the two people involved. The thing that makes our relationship unique is that this is the only Dr. Eaves Graydancer relationship there is in the world. That's the only one. There is no other Dr. Eaves and Graydancer relationship. Does she have other lovers? Yes. Do I have other lovers? Yes. Do I have other people I present with? Yes. Does she have other people she teaches with and talks with and does things with? Yes. But this is the only thing in that, and that's what makes it unique. And anything else, you need to realize everything else is finite. So if what made us special was my ability to flog, and then my rotator cuff goes out and I can't flog, then suddenly we're not special. But instead, that's an addition.
This relationship, this connection has really been my way to challenge a lot of that, what you mentioned. So I tend towards thinking that, things are special by description, right? So it's not just the fact that we are together, but because I have these skills and I have these characteristics and we do these things, right? And these things become precious because they are only ours. And so that is for sure my default. And one of the things that I really appreciate about the fact that I've been able to do this with you is that really you and I would not be together if I thought about if that's what I applied to this relationship. So it's challenged my thinking in my other relationships, because it's a lot easier to do that when you see somebody every single week, right? And I think in particular right now for me, I have 2 partners and both of them are unpartnered. So, I have 2 partners in Calgary. I have Gray. I'm attached to Gray in some way.
The Gray.
Yeah, the Gray. And it's I have a tendency towards thinking to myself, well, I have to find a way to make each one of my partners feel special, right? To say, no, nobody else has a cock just like yours. Nobody else, fucks me just like this. Or nobody else, makes me come this many times.
That
or nobody
is a true
else
statement about the nobody else fucks me just like this. However, that may have a different level of quality. There's no quality assigned to that statement.
Exactly.
As a teacher, it's when somebody comes up with an assignment that they're really proud of, and you're like, this is one of the most interesting assignments I've ever seen.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. So, that's one of those things that can be challenged, right? If you're open to challenging it. And what comes down to is, are you willing to be with that person or not, right? Knowing that they will have other dynamics with other people, right? That will be special to them.
And this is something that makes that particular thing extra hard. No, you talk about this because you introduced me to
escalator. Oh, yeah. So, one of the things that I was, very monogamous. I mean, I'm married and I've got a kid. I'm full of that stuff. When I came to poly, and I tend to be a very long-term relationship kind of gal, and it snuck up on me. So this is the idea that relationships should progress. They don't have value unless there are steps that intensify the relationship in some way, right? So in a sort of typical mono, I guess, relationship, that would be, we go on a date, then on a 6th date we have sex, eventually we say we love each other, eventually we move in together, eventually we get married, eventually we have kids, and eventually we get divorced. So that's the idea, and it's one that I fight with. Not every day, but I still fight with, is the idea that my relationship can be special even though it doesn't hit those marks, right? That it is still incredibly precious and important, and we are still good. We are good in a relationship even though it doesn't feel like we're moving anywhere. Because we genuinely don't want to move anywhere. I'm not moving in with my boyfriend anytime soon. It's not anytime soon, maybe never. Maybe that's never going to happen. So that's just not a thing, and that's a system that's been sort of applied. But it's a tuggle. It's a tuggle. Tuggle. That's it.
New word. Tuggle. And it's important to recognize that both poly and DS have sort of separate relationship escalators.
Yeah.
That you can be on intersectional escalators. Like, hey, we played around with DS. How soon do you think it'll be before I color you?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
That's the next step, right? Is
right.
that we're supposed to be working towards, Naya and I have been together for almost 10 years now. So at some point I'm going to marry her, right? That's got to be, we've been living together. Or maybe I'm sorting out. Hannah and I have been together for 4 or 5 years. So obviously, she's the one I'm going to marry because I've already collared Naya. So therefore, we've already hit that part of the relationship escalator. No, it's everybody has their own goals and things like that that happen. One of the things that you have to recognize, though, is that while we don't want to change everything, things are going to change. Things do change, and you have to recognize that you can't stop Tempest from fugiting on, and things are going to change, and your current status is current. And what counts is how you manage the transitions. And I'm going to dip into the rope world for a second to talk about that, because in rope, one of the things we'll do is have entire classes on transitions, because the idea is when you go up into a suspension, if you want to change position, you don't have to go all the way down, untie, retie, come all the way back up. You don't have to stop. You instead change and continue the relationship dynamic. And so that is something that happens with us. We actually went through a sort of a mini one when we decided we were going to call ourselves lovers.
Yeah, we did.
We had a discussion about, hey, we've been playing and talking with each other online, and we like playing when I get to see you once or twice a year. Is this, there's some feels here. Is there feels with you? And we had, are we the big R relationship? And the decision was, yes, we are. And how do we know that? Remember what we decided was that we knew we were in a relationship?
No.
I'm crushed. No, I'm not crushed at all. It was that she said, I would miss you if you were gone. And that's what did it.
Sounds like me.
Right. and that's how we knew we were in a relationship. Is that I'm going to miss you if I'm gone. So if that's the case, then what does that mean? How does that change things? And it meant that I had to go to Hannah and to Naya and say, so, this person who I've been referring to as a play partner for so long is now my lover. And they're like, wait, what does that mean? You said that we were just play partners. Wait, what does this mean? Are you going to be leaving now more? Is she going to start taking with you to classes and things like that? All these things. So it's important to recognize that things do change, especially if you are poly, where changing dynamics can happen. There's a lot of poly relationships where people are nesting partners but not lovers. Or they're nesting partners but their primaries are outside of the home. And things can change and fluctuate, and being open to that, that's why I put the delta sign up here for scientific guidance. Things do change.
We had that conversation too when Ozma came into the picture, right? Where I was like, I haven't been paying attention for a while, and it's all good, I think, but who is this person? She seems to be kind of showing up a lot, and how is she connected? What's going on? What? Right? So,
We're in that section.
Oh, in that section? Okay.
Good point talking about it. So the key to managing that challenge was
asking directly. I asked directly. I said, so, I'm not sure. It's all good. I think it's good. But I need to potentially make a decision here. And I need to know where the territory is so that I can make that decision.
In other words, it's the one word that always comes into every single King class ever. Starts with a C. Communication. Oh, wow. Somebody said consent. That's true.
I love that.
That's good King class too. Yes. Communication. It is communication. And it makes things like that an opportunity to build the polycule, the group of people, make it stronger through that communication, through deeper understanding. So, when's our anniversary?
Capcom.
Yes. Wow. Now,
What?
maybe when you came to Chicago.
Yeah, but I still consider. We decided it was Capcom.
It does. So yeah, finding things like anniversaries are a good idea, because that can be a shared celebration, and a shared celebration in the polycule. So she may not know, but if you ever look up U.S. Veterans Day, that's the anniversary of me and Hannah.
I didn't know that.
We literally decided that was the day, so it would be easy to remember. It's like, oh, it's Veterans Day. It must be your anniversary. Yay! And Naya and mine was on the summer solstice.
Oh.
So finding ways so that way we can say happy anniversary, and that brings it stronger together. The collaring ceremony is a thing where you can celebrate, and that can be a way that the non-DS part of the polycule can engage with the DS part of the polycule and reinforce each other. Okay, so finding ways to be able to celebrate these things, and that's a real easy way. If you can't stand, you cannot understand why your partner likes this other partner, but you've respected them, you've respected their ability. You're like, I want to do something nice, but I can't. I can get him a card. Okay, that's a level of support. It's a level of that kind of thing.
It's been one of the nicest things that my metamors in the past have done, is to give me a card to, give us us a card to celebrate our anniversary, and that they remembered that, and that they wished us well. It was a small gesture, but it was huge at the time. And whatever sort of other issues that we had, and there were many, right, that really went a long way.
If you are going to try and find ways to do that, please make sure that they are not tests or landmines. For example, as we're doing this, I suddenly thought, oh my God, I don't remember when her anniversary is for either of her other partners.
Well, it was news to me today, so I think we're okay. We're on the same.
Okay, all right, good. So it's not a landmine. If you forget, it's not. Don't.
If you forget my birthday, though, oh fuck. Good luck.
When's her birthday?
I have a servo for that. So.
See, that's great. I can count on Naya to remind him about my birthday.
Yes. Yeah. And so you do have to be realistic about the stresses of things. Okay. If in fact, this is one of the things. I mean, I've been dealing with some stresses in the outside, and I felt really bad coming here because my mindset. Part of my mindset is outside of here and outside of our time after 238 days apart, when I would like to just focus on her, and instead she has to deal with occasionally me saying, God damn it, can you fucking believe this?
And I usually say, no, I can't.
Yeah, and very supportive.
Yeah.
And that helps. Hope you enjoyed that wonderful part one. We will be editing down the other either part or parts. We'll see which one it is. And we will also be releasing the full, not unedited, but the full edited full class to the Patreon for everybody at the $1 level and above. So there's no more motivation to go to patreon.com/Graydancer and become a patron. So, meanwhile, thank you again, Twisted Monk, for your support. And you should check out twistedmonk.com to find some great bondage rope and other accessories. I want to try out one of his new candles at some point. And leeallure.com, not only for the amazing hypnosis files, but also to see what kind of events she's putting together, and maybe even find a link to getting some of her soap. Thank you for supporting this podcast. I am going to go and try and get over this flu and hopefully get more podcasts out. I'll see you all in Cleveland or Austin or perhaps even Kansas City, or maybe even all three. You can go to gru.space and get your tickets now. But remember, when it comes to kink, sex, and culture, it's not all black and white, so you might as well learn how to dance in the gray.